here. Welcome to the page. All of you subscribers who've been following me for a while, I say thank you. Today is a new day. We are launching a new product using YouTube for a live stream podcast. And I'm with my buddy from America, Keith. He's going to be my co host. And we're going to call this show This Week in Boxing. And this is episode 1. It's been a big week in boxing. We're going to focus on all things ahead, talking a little bit about today. 2 big cards. The one in San Francisco, California with Devin Haney and Regis Prograis, and then obviously the ESPN Plus card down in Florida. And before we get everything started, I want to say, Keith, say something to us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited for the opportunity for us to go live and have, an audience. And I'm excited, boxing's in a good place right now. And I just see a bright future for 2024 and this young generation of boxing. I like where we're at in the sport.
Oh, mate, 100%. For anyone who's watching this from our Facebook group, Boxing News Today, that's how I met Keith. And a lot of people tune into that channel. We have over 100,000 there. And it only takes a short amount of time to know who knows what in boxing and who doesn't. And you, my friend, know what you're talking about. And we were off camera talking about how we wanted to do this. We came up with a little bit of a script. And I thought it'd be wise to talk about a card that's been flying under the radar. You had to inform me that it was on the same day, the ESPN Plus card, headlined by Robeisy Ramirez.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those times where a main fight gets paired up on the same date as another one. And the Haney and Prograis fight obviously takes the headlines, but got a great list of talent in the ESPN TopRank card with headlining Robeisy Ramirez versus Rafael Espinoza in the main event, and a stable of young top-ranked talent also for the undercard.
Is it a co-main?
Yeah, there's we have let me just check here on the actual lineup.
The lineup's crazy. I was shocked when I looked at Robeisy Ramirez's opponent is 6'1". So that for that weight class, that's going to pose some issues. And before we get into the full card, I was brushing up my knowledge on the illustrious amateur career Ramirez has had, and it led me to, and you could fill us in on that a bit more on that. But there's kind of this sort of like double-edged sword with that topic. You have a guy like David Morrell Jr. with not a lot of pro fights, with a illustrious amateur career, and then people might judge him like he's only 9-0, he's not ready for the big fights, and they'll overlook the amateur career. Or you'll have a guy who has a lot of pro fights, didn't really have a good amateur career, and he may get judged for the opposite thing. And it's always interesting to me how us boxing fans pick and choose when to tear a fighter down. But with Ramirez, the guy is the goods.
Absolutely. I mean, he's got over 400 amateur fights other than Lomachenko, and I think maybe Rigondeaux. He's the only other 2-time gold medalist in the Olympics. So the guy's got an amazing amateur background, and he's also even more popular known in the States for he's the fighter that beat Shakur Stevenson. A lot of people have seen the when Shakur won the silver medal, he kind of had that bad interview where he broke down crying and was upset and whatnot. Well, Robeisy Ramirez was the fighter who gave him that loss. So that's, and Shakur is at the top of the game right now and is one of the most talented fighters there is. I would love to see one day down the line, if Robeisy moves up in weight classes, that'd be a big rematch for the two of them.
Yeah, you don't really hear a lot of pundits putting those two names together. Ramirez fights at a lower weight class, though, right?
He's at 126. Yeah, he's at flyweight, I believe, or I'm sorry, featherweight at 126.
So what do you think? If that in a perfect world, they'd have to meet, right? If Shakur and Ramirez would fight, where would that take place?
It's most likely. It's probably unlikely because you're looking at they're going kind of two different trajectories with Shakur's filling into his body and getting bigger, and Robeisy's 29 years old. He's really not getting any bigger. The other matchup that could be interesting is two-time gold medalists fighting at maybe 130 with Lomachenko and Robeisy Ramirez, depending on which route Lomachenko's career goes, because he's a natural 130 pounder. He really goes up to 135 just because the competition is there.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, in a perfect world, that'd be an easily marketed fight as well. I mean, has that ever
Yeah, both
happened?
top rank.
Yeah, both top rank. That was something about the whole when we talk about, I'll talk to a lot of like people in the MMA space and the beef with the MMA space. They'll talk about how the UFC is a monopoly and how all the when those fights happen, that sometimes the best fighters aren't in the UFC. There's guys in the PFL. There's guys who fight in one championship. Now, and then when the beef with boxing is that there isn't a monopoly. Fight fans want everything. It's the corruption of
Yeah.
there are so many promotions. But do you think that a Haney Prograis fight card on the same day as the top ranked fight card with Ramirez and Xander Zayas, do you think that's good for the sport, or does that hold the sport back?
I would say that I think it holds it back. I think it'd be better to have them on separate dates because they're two quality, nights of boxing on at the same time, and with one being a pay-per-view, the more popular one, Haney and Prograis. If you're going to spend the $74 or whatever it is for the pay-per-view, you're going to be locked in on that. You're not really going to be interested on switching back and forth and watching the ESPN Plus top rank card, which is, not a pay channel type fight. So I think that it's better to have them split up. But when you have two different promotions, they're not asking each other, it's dog eat dog, whoever's, the power man wins and the big fights on the zone this weekend. So they're not going to say, hey, we're worried about top rank getting viewers. It's kind of every man for themselves in this sport. That's kind of the one thing about it not being a monopoly is you got like several different people trying to, just worry about themselves and their marketing. And it sometimes dates don't line up.
For the people who aren't aware of that fight card, ESPN Plus, I'll go over the other fights real quick, and I want to kind of pick your brain on something that the fight fans should look out for. The co-main is Xander Zayas versus Jorge Fortea. Xander's the obviously Puerto Rican young kid, lustrous amateur career. Fortea is a bit of a veteran. He's Spanish from Spain. You got Bruce Carrington versus Jason Sanchez, Rohan Polanco versus Keith Hunter, and Richard Torres Jr. versus Curtis Harper. The heavyweight clash is the last one, which is maybe a sign of the times or where we are in the sport. But there was a time where those heavyweights, the big boys, would be at the top of the bill. What fight other than the main are you looking forward to the most?
Uh, I would say, let's see, what was the second one that you
Zan,
announced? What was the second
Zan,
fight?
Xander Zayas versus Jorge Fortea, Bruce
Yeah,
Carrington, Jason Sanchez, Polanco versus Hunter.
I would say definitely the co-main event was Xander. Xander's the next Puerto Rican
Man,
boxing star,
he's
in
so
my opinion.
flashy. Yeah, dude. There's
He's
something.
and he's a killer. He's kind of he sells the product. Like he is a guy that's, Puerto Ricans are a loyal fan base, and he comes to fight. And there hasn't really been one since Cotto that really got the Puerto Rican backing, and he's a young star, and he's just, I mean, he's well rounded. He's a good, smart guy. He's the total package. He's got it all, and he's young,
Looks
and
the
he's
part and says
right
the right
there.
stuff.
Absolutely. He's been bred to do this. He's not there by accident. This has been the mission and the goal the entire time, and he's right on pace.
And how do you think with his career trajectory? Because there was a time. I mean, when you was it Wilfred Benitez who was a world champion at 17? You know what I mean? And this
I'd
early
have
day,
to look that up, but he was young.
I'm talking like late 70s, early 80s, and then
Yep.
it just seems like in this day and age of wanting to protect that O and molding a fighter, sometimes we never see the fighter come out and say, "Hey, speed me up." You know what I'm saying? We
Yeah.
all it's more like the fans will say Shakur is picking and choosing his fights, or Floyd picked and chose his career. With Xander, it seems to me when I watch him fight, how he carries himself, he seems like one of those throwback fighters that he would fight in a backyard with nobody watching if that was the only fight he could get. So I'm kind of interested to see how Top Rank is going to manage him.
Absolutely. I agree. And in the division that he's in, I would say that he's within a year, year and a half, 2 years of a title shot. Like I really think that him and Tim Zhu in about a year and a half would be a
Ooh, you think he's
slugfest
ready for
war at
that?
154. I
I mean,
I'd have to see. I'd have to see how he performs in these next, two or three fights. But
yeah,
there's really not the one thing about the 154-pound division is there's not a ton of talent there.
he's
So, and
floating.
he's going to want to go forward. He's not going to want to take. He's the type of guy that'd rather have a challenge
So
than
he wouldn't go to
dragging it
47.
on.
He'd go to 60. He is about 5'10". Xander.
Yeah, Xander's definitely going to be either fighting at 154 going up to 160.
Okay.
147 is not in the cards for him.
Okay, man. I love getting excited about potential matchups. Obviously, we're just kind of having a thought experiment. But now that you mentioned Xander versus Tim Zhu, I mean, Zhu, all the narrative down here, he wants Charlo. People don't realize Tim's not that tall. He's only about 5'9", and he doesn't
Yeah,
cut a lot of weight. And so
yeah,
the Charlo boys are, they're bigger boys. Like they're gonna have the
yeah,
size range on Tim, but Tim just, I mean, he got a dog in him, literally. Remember
yeah.
he got
I
bit.
I I think that Zoo definitely deserves either, or I'm sorry, Jamel Charlo. He either needs to fight Tim Zoo and give him the opportunity and go back down to 154, or Crawford
Yeah, you're talking Maul or
at one.
Mel? Mel.
Jamel,
Yeah,
Jamel,
Mel.
yeah.
Yeah. So what you mentioned when we were off the air, you mentioned Richard Torres Jr. He's the What's his upside? He's kind of an in betweener with weight classes as well, right?
Yeah, he's really, with nowadays the heavyweight division guys being just enormous, with Tyson Fury being 6'9", 6'10", and the
Yeah.
average guy, other guys being like 6'6". He's a smaller heavyweight, but he's a compact, he's a fast twitch,
Yeah.
powerful southpaw. Nowadays you would call him small,
Mm,
for the heavyweight division, where, back in Holyfield's day and Tyson, he'd kind of be fitting that size, back then. But the heavyweight division has just gotten so big that Torres is almost built height wise that he could be a cruiser, but he's
yeah.
thick. And
Yeah.
he's just, there's not a whole lot of weight for him to lose. So, I mean, heavyweight's where he's been his whole career, and that's what he's going to go with.
You like his upside?
I like him, and he's a fan friendly style, and he's definitely a fun guy to watch. You're not going to be bored watching a Richard Torres fight by any
Yeah.
means. I just, right now, he's been put in on very lopsided fights. He's been the more talented fighter by a
Hasn't really
long
been
shot. Like
tested.
not at all. They've put him in with guys that really had no business being in with him, and he's, you know, put a hurting on some of them. So I won't really know till, because I mean, everybody looks good against a nobody. I'll have to, his litmus test will be when he fights somebody that's, you know, got something coming back for him.
Yeah. Is there any? So we got that card. Do you want to move forward with the Devin Haney Regis?
Sure.
Yeah. So that's San Francisco. It is out west. So I should have done my due diligence to look at the times, because that 3 hour time difference. I don't know what time the card starts down in Pembroke, Florida, but we do know that's East Coast versus San Francisco, California. That will be a 3 hour difference. Maybe they played that up. I have no idea about that. Who knows? You said they probably didn't even communicate, but
It
that's the
it
headline.
could. Yeah, it could overlap. Like you might be able to watch, you could probably watch some of the ESPN Plus and then see the co-main and main event for the DAZN, and it work out all right. I mean, it's going to be staggered for sure.
Yeah, so Regis Prograis, he has his belt on the line against Devin Haney. We posted the photo in the Boxing News Today group, one of the photos of the stare down, and I was kind of shocked that a lot of the fans not everyone, but a lot of fans didn't know. They were questioning where Devin's belts were, and that's kind of a telltale sign that there needs to be a little bit more education on what happens with these fights, what's at stake, what's on the line, and what's on the line is Regis's belt at 140. Devin's belts don't exist at 140, and he's the one coming up.
Exactly. Yeah, Devin just got done being the undisputed at 135, and he actually relinquished his belts now, and going up to 140, where he's now the challenger. And Haney's the actual champion with the
Prograis.
WBC.
Prograis.
I'm sorry, yes, Regis Prograis is the champion at 140 now. So Haney's really the opponent in this fight. But if you look at the headlines and all the promotional material, it actually DAZN has Haney Prograis, where usually the champion would be the first name. So it shows you who DAZN's really kind of big on and favoring and looking to win this fight. They're definitely on the side of Haney, because I've never seen a champion on the B side of any fight card.
This just happened, not to this grand scale, but a couple weeks back in Australia, one of the belts, Dylan Biggs, 21-year-old, was the champ, and he took on challenger Tim's little brother, Nikita Zoo. And there was a bit
Yes,
of drama in the media. They got into a bunch of beef, who was walking out first. But this
yeah,
is much different. This isn't a regional Australian belt. This is for the 140, the green belt, right? This I like when
yes.
the fighters call it the green belt. It's the one I like. Optically, it's a cool looking belt. But I made it a point for the last few weeks, for all the media I was creating online, I put Regis Prograis versus Devin Haney, because you gotta give you respect. And what if Regis needed any other element to be motivated? Not that that kid needs any more motivation. He has it, because DAZN. Did you hear what Paulie Malignaggi? I read an article he gave, I think, to maybe one of these boxing sites, but he was talking about this
Pro
exact thing.
Box TV, I believe.
Yeah, he was talking about this exact thing, and said the only thing he worries about with Regis is that if Regis doesn't knock him out, he's not going to win. Based on, he
Yeah,
was psychoanalyzing the marketing of DAZN, how DAZN will give it to Haney because this is the guy that they're pushing, and that's the kind of crux of the major issue, in my opinion, with boxing a bit. That sort of that's even a thing.
yeah. I really, in this fight, I really, really think that it's you know what Haney's going to do. Haney is a sharpshooter, slick boxer who's going to move and get in
Use
and
the
out and
jab.
control distance. The thing that I've noticed, I've heard a lot of people, I've watched interviews and really paid attention to guys that had worked with and were either in the gym sparring with or worked alongside of both Regis and Haney, so that they could draw a comparison with one another. And the total consensus was that everybody gave a pretty solid advantage skill wise to Devin Haney. The Everyone pretty much says that they think that, and I agree. Uh, Regis's only chance is to make this a fight, a scrap, and not a boxing match. If he comes out and tries to box Devin, he's going to have a long night. He's really going to have to come after him and put pressure on him that he's never saw before, because stylistically and skill wise, Regis started boxing at 17 years old. Devin Haney turned pro at 17 years old. So where one's 34 and one's 24, the person with the more experience is by far Devin Haney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that the story about Haney turning pro with his father Bill taking him to Mexico, pulling him out of school, kind of like, I don't want to say illegally, but as a non in America, you can't buy beer as an 18-year-old. You
He
could maybe
dropped out in
drive.
the seventh grade.
What was that?
He dropped out in the seventh grade.
Seventh,
That's where
seventh.
I'm pretty sure he said seventh grade is where he stopped.
And then you think about how all the stories of Bill taking him to Mexico and having those fights. It triggers memories of one of the Creed movies, how one of those Creed movies started, and he's down in Mexico crossing the border trying to get. They're not even smokers at this point. These are just, you're basically cannon fodder for the local Tijuana boys. And that I think that's an element of Devin's game that gets underlooked, because a lot of people will see that classy style, they'll see his polished career, that record, but they might forget about the mindset. Like, to have that mind molded at such a young age, to be able to deal with adversity, to be able to deal with hecklers in the stands, to be able to deal with it's a different country, different language, way different culture. It might be a border, but there's a huge different culture, and he's been kind of groomed and bred for this. And that is something that, it's tough to measure. on the value that a fighter has when he has that, and Devin has that.
You stated that perfectly. He's been groomed like I've never seen a fighter more prepared and brought along properly to become a world champion at a young age. I mean, it's been a plan that's really been put together well. And Bill Haney, really, you got to give credit to
You
Bill.
do.
He really has made his son into an amazing fighter, and you got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, Devin was fortunate to have a father who was able to put him in very good situations to be successful around the best coaches and stuff. But yeah, it's pretty impressive. It's a very cool story. It's one that's not you don't really hear about.
Yeah, in the next 10 years, on how it looks his career is going, you got to start thinking about Bill Haney and the likeness of, like, you know, Serena and Venus Williams' father, Tiger Woods' dad, these sort of guys who had a sort of vision for their child, and not only didn't necessarily force it on him, because we know if you force it on the kid, that doesn't always go right. Think about, remember Rob Marinovich, the young
Yes.
um, all-time quarterback prospect went to USC, got drafted by the
Yep.
Raiders, and his dad, I think Marv Marinovich, very famous strength and conditioning coach,
Yes.
after Todd was his name, the son, his career fizzled out and he got into drugs, and he spoke candidly. The dad was like, I think maybe I pushed him too hard. But you see,
Absolutely.
when it goes right, when you see the right, like how the ones I mentioned, it seems to me Bill at is finally starting to have fun with it as well. I mean, he can be divisive and polarizing online, but that's him playing the game. That sells tickets, and he knows that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another one that's been kind of groomed just like that is Lomachenko. Him and Devin Haney both were kind of like out of the crib. That was their fathers have saw the dream that they had, and they made it come true. And that's with the amount of talent and just how hard it is to become a professional fighter and champion. I mean, you just got to really commend the fathers. That's just an amazing. And Teofimo Lopez and his father as well.
Mate, when Tio's last fight against Josh Taylor, I was doing videos on this channel. I did a couple segments just on Tio's dad in a positive light, and it was kind of shocking and eye opening to me on some of the commenters, who take that as a negative, when because they'll judge the character, or they'll judge the online persona of the guy. But Tio's dad, you see how flashy and charismatic and talented and skilled Tio is. Tio comes from his dad. His dad's the same thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I love their dynamic. Something that I should mention while we're on this point that I like to highlight, that I don't know if the narrative or the American media talks about, and I'm not breaking news here because I know Tim talks about it. Um, anytime he's asked, it was the opposite with Tim and Nikita Zoo. So people think that just because their dad is Costa Zoo, that it was this relationship. Tim's been on record that one of his driving forces is to be better than his dad because his dad abandoned him. His Costa left him when Tim was a young boy, moved to Russia, started a second family, and has another family with kids. And
Yeah.
he talks to him and they're in his life. But Costa didn't take him to the gym. It was Tim's uncles. He does have family from that bloodline in Sydney, but
Yes.
it's one of the things that motivates Tim, and you could see it in his fighting style. When you watch Tim Zoo, guys, you're seeing a kid who's fighting with a chip on his shoulder, trying to be better than his dad out of spite.
Yeah. I'm
And
I'm a big Tim fan. I
me
really
too,
I
man.
like him.
He does his
He's just a
he's in
he's a
camp all
throwback
year.
fighter.
Throwback. He reminds me of a little bit smaller, but in a perfect world, if we had a time machine, I'd love to see him versus Kelly Pavlik, man. Now Kelly a bit bigger, and I'm a homer. Grew up in Youngstown. Kelly's my childhood friend, but when I watched him get into like slugfest and puts himself in danger in how he controls his front foot and how he uses just basic techniques that the average fan might think that he's basic, to master straight punches and just stay there and master that front foot and not get hit and then hit, man, I think that would be a fun fight.
Absolutely. Another one that if you could, line it up perfectly, give Tim a couple more years to see where he goes with his career. But him and Gennady Golovkin, if they were,
Oh,
able to line up, would have been a great one too, I believe.
those two are made for each other. And
Yeah,
can people sleep on Gennady, man? There, a couple bad decisions. I'm not going to say I'm not going to say here nor there, but there was a time where what didn't Nike wasn't Nike sponsoring him? He was a
yeah,
global. He was a feared knockout artist. He was the little choir.
absolutely,
He was a little choir boy looking kid who looked like he'd be in your church choir, and then you'd see him in the ring, and he was a marauder. And
absolutely,
we're just so fickle as boxing fans. We just throw people away. But if you guys don't know about Gennady or watch his highlight reel, watch that kid's highlight reel, mate.
absolutely.
What do you know? Were you looking for any other fights on the Regis Prograis? How do you? Before we move on, let's get your opinion. How does that go? It looks like it's going to go the way of Devin Haney playing a boxing match, not getting into a fight. Is that correct?
I would have to, if I had to guess, I
I
would
don't do
say that.
predictions. I don't do
Yeah,
predictions.
I don't like to either because when I do make a prediction, I want to be right, and I try to watch the boxing event in a non-biased and just see it for what it is. So I'm really not big, but if I had to, it's really a toss up because it's really who controls it, who fights their fight. But I know one thing: the best fight that Regis has had, even though he lost, was against Josh Taylor in 2019. He hasn't looked that great since,
I
and he
know.
definitely didn't look good against Zorilla. Going off of which you can only go off of fighters' last fight as far as how they looked to try to make a prediction. I would have to say if I had to make a bet, I would say unanimous decision, Haney.
Yeah.
Uh, and the only chance that I see Prograis having is to maybe go to the body early, make it a physical, dirty fight, try to slow him down, and in the second half of the fight, turn it up on him. I think the first part of the fight is going to be very lopsided. I think that Devin Haney's going to be up on the scorecards, and at some point, Prograis is going to have to throw caution to the wind and decide: am I going to just finish this fight and lose, or am I going to take a risk and maybe get caught coming in? But it's going to be Prograis, whether he comes after him and tries to, let it all hang out, it's going to be the big thing. If he tries to make it a boxing match, I see it possibly a boring fight with Haney winning a unanimous decision.
Yeah, it just I guess at the highest level, when you get to the highest level of anything, specifically combat sports, you're able to see the room for error of each fighter. You could see how the almost like the roadmap of which fighter, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and that's why they always say styles make fights. And it's it's just when is the last time we saw an upset in terms of the puncher catches the boxer? I don't have this answer. Maybe there has been one. I just can't think of it. But gone are the days of Hagler Hearns of like
Yeah,
that sort of thing. That would be fun. We're bloodthirsty as fans. We want that, especially after sitting through. Look, I don't want to give my opinion on it, but read the forums about the Shakur fight, and then like I felt like I liked. There were moments of that fight I liked as a boxing practitioner, but like in terms of like knockouts, when is the last time you saw an underdog? I mean, Jordan Gill just knocked out Mick Conlon in Belfast. That's
yes,
not main. That's not, you wouldn't really call that mainstream.
right.
Did you see?
Yeah,
That was crazy.
I did see highlights of that. I just recently, as of late, I've really seen skills pay the bills, and
Yep.
more usually the more skillful fighter, and especially on this one because Devin Haney has a built-in excuse as well. He's coming up for his first fight at 140,
Yep.
fighting the champ, where he's not going to take chances and put himself at risk if he can just stay on the outside and box him to a decision, a unanimous decision. They will take that and take that belt at 140 gladly. It's going to be Prograis that needs to push the issue and make it his fight. A win for Haney is just a total. There's just no bad way to look at it, whether it's boring or not. He went up to another weight division. He would capture another belt at a different weight division. So he's going to take that win by any means necessary. And I don't see him taking a whole lot of chances unless Regis really forces him to.
So and Devin's been very vocal about wanting to be undisputed at this weight class. So let's play fortune teller and he beats Regis, we'll say by decision. He takes that one belt. Now you then have Raleigh has a belt in that weight class. Subriel Matias has the other one and the other's vacant, or am I missing someone?
And Tiafimo has the other.
Okay, so the likelihood of 140 being undisputed, would it be more likely that it will happen for Teo, happen for Dev if he beats Regis, or Matias? Like in the future, how do you see that playing out?
It's really, I would say, ask me on Sunday
Okay,
after I have a better idea of what it's going to look like, because I mean, if you have Regis, it's just really who wins this fight's really going to determine the way things go, from here. So I'd have to answer that after we see how Saturday goes.
so let's say Dev wins though. So it's Sunday.
If
Dev
if
has the belt.
Devin
So you have
if
Dev,
if Devin
Teo.
wins, if Devin wins, I could see either them wanting to fight the Tiafimo because he's got a belt and a big name, or taking the easiest fight at 140 with a belt would be Rolly Romero.
But Raleigh said he's good. Raleigh just said on his Instagram he's moving to 47. So he'd have to leave
Yeah.
that. He'd have maybe because you said he's close with. He has a relationship with Teo.
Him and Tiafimo's family are pretty close. Their fathers are really good friends, and they've spent a lot of time. They're pretty much, they won't say it maybe if you're talking, in boxing terms, but there's a friendship there that, they never planned on fighting one another.
Okay, that's the best way of putting it. No one's calling out Subriel Matias, though, are they?
He's the boogeyman at 140.
And
He's really, the risk reward is just, he doesn't have a huge name, a huge following, but he's a dangerous guy to get in the ring. He's really the guy that I would be afraid to fight at 140 out of all of them.
you know what?
Even though
So my
Tiafimo is my favorite,
yeah,
Matthias is a. You're not going to have an easy night with him.
man, I one of my buddies, he's AI. He's a programmer. He does code. He does AI, and he was telling me this idea. Well, I was telling him an idea of mine. Maybe anyone listening to this, don't steal my idea. But to help promote non-English speaking fighters, why don't we create an AI microphone to where in real time, Subriel Matias could be speaking in his native tongue, but to the audience, it's coming out English. Because I think that's one of the things that why guys like David Morrell Jr., Subriel Matias, your boy Robeisy Ramirez, the list goes on, that they're not household names in America because of that language barrier.
That would be a genius idea. It
Yeah.
really would.
I just came up with that the other day because I'm like, as I'm doing research for the show and for the fights, I'm like, how are these guys? How does David Morrell Jr. have like 60 or Super Matias 60,000 people on Instagram? I was like, this
Yeah,
dude should have millions. Like it's
yeah,
wild to me. But it's
it
that
really
language
is.
step. So
Yep.
what we got who's so Liam Perro, Montana Love. That's kind of what I always call a crossroads fight. If you guys haven't seen Liam Perro fight, he's an Aussie. It's a classic hit, and he's fighting Montana Love out of Cleveland, Ohio. Montana Love's last fight was against another Aussie, Stevie Sparks. It's where he got disqualified. I think it was on the undercard of a Jake Paul fight where Sparks got thrown out the ring. But Stevie came from Australia to Cleveland, and he came for a fight, and I had him up in that fight. But did you catch that one?
I saw that, and I just second what you said. You pretty much hit on it perfectly.
Yeah, so this one is I feel is going to be a sleeper fight. It's going to be all action. Montana has something to prove. Liam Perro is one of these Aussies who didn't come through the Australia amateur ranks, so the Australian media really doesn't support him like a Tim Zhu or a another kid, Jai Apatow, fighters who come through the amateur programs. He's more aligned with like the George Cambosis is, who had to go overseas and do all the hard work on their own and then build their name like
Gotcha.
that. So Liam's coming off a fight. Jeff Fennick, boxing Hall of Famer, Australian legend, was training this kid Brock Jarvis to be a champion, and Brock fought Liam in the last fight. Brock was undefeated, bodied up, and Liam knocked him out in the first. So
Wow.
he stole all that momentum. He's bringing that into this fight with Montana, and Montana's trying to get back on track because DAZN's putting a lot of momentum behind Montana. He's very marketable. He says the right stuff. He looks the part. I don't know what the odds say, but I'm putting my money on Liam Perro. That's one. That's one bet I'll make, just based on what I know about Peril and how he fights and the psychology of the fight game.
And I can't disagree with you on that. And also seeing how Montana responded when they turned the heat up on him in the last fight, I would be
That
coming.
pressure.
He's got something to prove. So I'm excited to see that fight. I think that's going to be one that can maybe steal the night.
All right. Do you want to touch on anything on this card, or do you want to go into our last element of the show, which is a feature called This Week in Boxing, Your Favorite Boxers? And what we're gonna do here, if my buddy's all set, I'm gonna reel off about 5 mainstream fighters, and as the weeks go on, you guys know boxing, it's a very fickle state at times. There's always things happening. Keith is going to give us his opinion without even thinking about it. First thing comes to mind when I say a fighter's name: fighter number 1, Bud Crawford.
Bud Crawford right now, you'd have to arguably say he's the pound for pound number one, the hottest guy in boxing right now. It really comes to is does he do the rematch with Errol Spence at 147? His name's been thrown around here at 168, making the jump to fight Canelo. And there's also a narrative between him and Jermell Charlo for 154. So those are the three fights that it all really based on what Canelo chooses to do, because it seems like Crawford really wants that as his first choice. The one that I really would like to see Crawford fight is stay at 147 and give Jerron Boots Ennis an opportunity to take that belt, to take those belts from him. That's what but it's really Crawford's at a spot right now where he's, put the work in. He's pretty much at a shot caller status other than his, mandatories. And it's got to be, he wants the money fight. So, and I don't think that Boots is going to be a money fight for him. So he may not take that. It's probably going to be either Jermell or Canelo.
I think I can speak for everyone watching this. That Boots versus Bud fight will be chaos. All right, fighter number 2, David Benavidez Jr.
Benavidez is another guy who, stock is very high after just dismantling Boo Boo and also beating Caleb Plant in the fight prior. So his stock is very high. He's kind of sitting back here, though, and also waiting to see who wins the Canelo sweepstakes. If Canelo doesn't take that fight, I would have to say the smartest thing for Benavidez to do at this point would be to go up to 175 and challenge Bivol and see if he can make a statement by beating him. If Bivol doesn't line up, maybe take on Beterbiev at 175. If that doesn't line up, maybe 168, stay in that division and take on David Morrell.
I got to fix David Benavidez, not the junior. It's his older brother, Jose. It was a Freudian slip. All right, moving forward. Great insights. Gervonta Davis.
Gervonta is a guy. I'm a Gervonta fan. I do think that his career's been brought along very safely, and they've been tailor-made picks for him. It's definitely time that he fights a big name and a 50-50 type of fight. I'd like to see him either fight, if he's going to stay at 135, I'd love to see him in against Lomachenko. 135, I'd like to see him against Shakur. If he goes up to 140, I'd like to see him versus Haney or Teofimo. Ryan Garcia, he already took care of him, so I'm not really interested in seeing that again. So I'd like to see Tank just really fight a solid 50-50 challenging fight and really take a chance. He's 29 years old. He's not young anymore. It's time for him to really just get into the, meat and potatoes of his career and make a statement.
I think that would be, with his style, a 50-50 sort of fight would bring the best out of him, but only time will tell. Guys, we got 2 more fighters to Keith break down. So the second to last one, coming off of last week, Ryan Garcia.
Ryan Garcia, his stock's definitely gone up, and he's back, in the winning column. I have to say, the one thing I did take away, there's a couple things I took away from this past weekend. One is Oscar Duarte. For a guy that was his kind of Super Bowl and his once in a lifetime type fight, I wasn't impressed with his effort and his, I thought that he could have went at it more and been more aggressive and just went all in. I was kind of disappointed with, his his output and just his whole overall, stepping up to the plate. Uh, Garcia really is showing his defense is very spotty. He's really an offensive, he's a strong offensive fighter, but it's the defense is not there. So he's got a lot to work on defensively. And another thing that guys at 140 are able to take those punches a lot better than guys at 135. The guys that he was putting to sleep early at 135, he's going to have to go into fights longer and deeper at 140, which gives him more chances for his defense to be exposed and also for his chin to get caught. So I think 140 is going to he's going to have his hands full with just about any top guy. I mean, 140 is a stacked division, and I don't see an easy fight out there for Ryan Garcia. And I like Ryan. I'm a big fan, and I hope that he's got everything. He's marketable. He's a good guy. He's a fun guy to watch. But 140 is going to be challenging for Ryan.
The one thing I like that I saw from him is kind of a bigger picture sort of thing. Him still being, I think, 25 is the fact that he added new wrinkles to his game. They weren't perfect, but the reason why it's a benefit for me for his career of seeing a fighter add new things, add new skills that he could still work on is that it tells you how he's thinking. He knows that he needs to get better. He's not just a guy who his boots are dug into the sand and what you see is what you get. So I like that fact. I thought the critics were a bit, critical on his shoulder roll and how it wasn't as technical as maybe a Floyd or a Sweet Pea Whitaker that we see, the Masters. But I think the benefit of that though is that we're seeing a Ryan who is listening and wanting to get better. And I think the future is bright. But you're right, man. That 140 is a murderer's row. Last fighter seems like he's the king, and he's been the king for a long time. What should we expect, and what do you think when I say the name Canelo Alvarez?
Canelo, he's still the face of boxing. The resume, I mean, he's in my opinion, it's hard to say any Mexican fighter had a more impressive run and been the face of boxing like him. I was not a huge Canelo guy in the beginning, but he's grown on me, and he's just he's the face of boxing right now. He's the shot caller. Everybody, whether it's the promoter, the opponent, and everyone wants to be part of the Canelo sweepstakes. So I know he's got one more fight, I think, in the contract with PBC. So whether it's Jamal Charlo, whether it's Benavidez, who everybody wants, I've heard Munguia's name being thrown around. It's kind of really Canelo gets what Canelo wants, and it's really going to be does he really feel that he's the baddest guy at 168 and that this is the best Canelo, like he said after beating who was his last opponent?
Canelo Alvarez just beat my head is mush right now. Not Ryder.
Uh, it wasn't Plant. It was well
He
anyway.
fought.
His last fight, he said that this is the best Canelo, and
Yeah. He fought.
he's going to have an asterisk on his name if a lot of the fight fans are not going to give him his respect if he doesn't face Benavidez. Like he's
Jamel
got
Charlo.
to,
He just beat Charlo.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jermell
Yeah.
Charlo. So, and he said that he feels that he's the best at 168. I really think that boxing and, the boxing needs that fight, Benavidez and Canelo. I think that that's the fight for that division. And, we'll have to see. Like I said, that's Canelo. Canelo calls the shots.
Guys, thank you for tuning in. This was episode 1. If you're not following us on Facebook, go do that now. Boxing News Today. If you did come from there and you recognize our big mugs, we say thank you. Subscribe to this channel, Jonny says on YouTube. Keep following us on Boxing News Today. You'll be seeing a lot more of Keith. Before I let you guys go, Keith, any send-offs? You want to add anything going into the weekend of fights? Maybe something we didn't touch?
I'm just excited to see, how the weekend plays out. This is my first ever live broadcast. So, hopefully I'll get better as we go, but it was fun. And I love talking boxing, and I'm excited to see where we go with this in the future.
All right. Rock and roll, guys. We'll be in touch. Keith, I'll be in touch.
Take care.
Yep. Give me 1 second.